You're listening to Men of Abundance, episode 185. This is Pay It Forward, Aloha Friday. What can we learn from the growth of a lobster?
Welcome to Men of Abundance, the podcast for those looking to level up their lives by hanging out with some of the greatest leaders and established professionals in our community, living a life of integrity, honor, and the abundance mentality. Prepare to pay it forward with your host, former Army medic turned lifestyle entrepreneur, Wally Carmichael.
Aloha, Men of Abundance. I am Wally Carmichael, your founder and host of the Men of Abundance podcast, the Pay It Forward community. Today is Pay It Forward Aloha Friday, and we are talking about the growth of a lobster. This is actually an analogy and an idea that I got from a video that I watched of a rabbi who was talking about the growth of a lobster and relating that to the stress that humans go through. And I'm going to put my own little twist on it as well. But just in case you haven't seen the video and you want to reference what I'm talking about, I will share the video of the rabbi talking about this. It's only a 1-minute video of him talking about how a lobster grows and his take on the subject. But the process that a lobster endures to grow is a great analogy for why feeling stress and the pain of adversity allows us men to grow as well. You see, a lobster is a soft animal that lives inside of a hard shell, and that shell does not expand. So when the lobster starts to feel uncomfortable because it's growing and it's outgrowing the shell, it's outgrowing the space that it lives in, it goes to a safe place where it's away from predatory fish, because this takes a couple of days and the lobster is extremely vulnerable during this time. So it goes to a safe place and it sheds its shell, and this evidently takes a couple of days for it to complete the process. And the lobster must do this several times throughout its life in order to stay alive and grow. If the lobster does not shed its shell, it won't grow, and therefore it will suffocate and die. So as the rabbi points out, the stimulus for the lobster to shed the shell and to grow, it has to feel uncomfortable. It feels the discomfort. And if the lobster didn't feel that discomfort, it wouldn't know that it was being suffocated. And therefore, the lobster would not grow. In fact, it would die. And if the lobster did like humans do and take medication to not feel the emotional and physical discomfort, it would die. Now, I'm not saying that a lobster feels emotional discomfort. Maybe it does. I don't know. But this is where I'm going to put my own little spin on this whole analogy. This very thing is killing many men and women. Now, many of them aren't physically dead yet, but they are walking dead and certainly not growing, because they are not feeling and living through the discomfort that is so important for them to grow more resilient to the adversity of life. You know, every single one of our guests on Men of Abundance have shared their kick in the gut moment. They have shared the pain and discomfort. They have all also shared how they lived through that adversity, and more importantly, they have grown as a result of enduring the pain and discomfort. So the message here today is, do not hide from emotional pain. Confront it and deal with it. As you know, I feel you should talk about it with your spouse. You should talk about the pain that you're feeling, the emotional pain. Yes, even talk about your feelings. You should talk about this with your spouse, or at least a few men who you know and trust will, at the very least, listen to what you have to say. And if you would like to chat or talk with a few men, I suggest you start connecting with a few guys over at the Men of Abundance community. At the very least, get in your church or other mastermind groups with real men who will have your back. Guys, this is extremely important on so many levels. You know, I was active duty military. My grandfather committed suicide, military. My uncle, who was in the 101st Airborne Division during Vietnam, killed himself, PTSD, didn't even know what it was back then. There was no treatment for it. And many of my friends throughout my life have committed suicide. So I take mental health issues very seriously. But I also know, being in the medical field as long as I have, that many people are way over medicated because it's the easy way out. And there is a place for medication, but there is way too much just simply being handed out, and too many people are trying to hide from their physical and emotional pain. And I don't want to get into the whole Second Amendment and gun debate, but I do want to point out that many of these young men, and even the guy in Vegas that had recently shot up a lot of people, whether it's school, outside of school, whatever the case may be. Every single one of them had a couple things in common. They didn't all have mental issues. They weren't all mental cases. But all of them were lonely men. Not one of them had a group of men that they were talking to, that they could communicate with. It's extremely important not only for you to get into a group of men and have conversations and have these hard conversations with your loved ones, with your spouse, with your siblings, but also to bring in other men that you see need to be in a group. All men need to be in other groups of men and have these conversations. Look for these guys. Pay attention in your community. Pay attention at work, wherever it is that you frequent. Watch the other people around you. Pull those people in. Don't sit back and talk about them. Don't sit back and point and laugh or just say, that guy's weird and I'm going to leave him alone. No. Figure out what's going on in his head. Listen to what he has to say. At least be that man, that only man that may have pulled him aside and said, hey, come on, let's go play a game of basketball. Let's sit down and have some coffee. Do whatever. Play chess. But bring them in. This is what we need in our society is more men that are willing to bring other men alongside them, lead, train, and mentor them, be a friend to them, and at least sit down and have a conversation with them and listen to what they have to say. It will make a world of difference. All right, guys, go out there and live your life of abundance and make sure to pay it forward.